How many people here are involved in a startup? Okay, good. Because if you weren't, then I could just talk about something else, like my kid's feet or something.
Can I interrupt? Sorry.
Yeah.
We just had a call on the hashtag Mike's Room, thank you, if the guys at the back, can we open a window or turn the air conditioning up? Because a few people are a bit warm, that's all. So yeah, open a window or turn the air conditioning up, that'd be great. Thank you. Over to you. Carry on, Peter.
So I'm old and I'm smelly already, and I've been doing startups for a long time. Started an online brokerage firm back when that was a cool idea. Grew it from some code I wrote on my laptop to one of the fourth largest the fourth retail brokerage firm in the world. Then went on to do some other startups. They all had very happy exits. More recently, I was the CEO of Bitly, which I didn't start. Between my angel investing and the funds that I work with and accelerator programs and my own efforts, I've been involved with hundreds of startups or hundreds of entrepreneurs. And I find myself giving them the same kind of advice over and over again. And so I thought I would try to collapse that down, which usually I can spend 3 or 4 hours pontificating, but I'm going to collapse it down into 10 minutes. So I'm sorry, I'm a native English speaker, I'm going to speak really quickly, but I'm giving you like 20 years of wisdom in 10 minutes or less.
Ooh.
Which way is forward? Okay, biggest problem I find. Entrepreneurs think they know something that they don't. Now, ignorance is painful, but thinking you know something and getting it wrong is much worse. When a doctor misdiagnoses something because they don't get all the details or do the right tests, or when an entrepreneur proceeds down a path kind of blindly out of conviction without collecting any data to support his idea, it's always a disaster. So how do you solve this problem? People have been solving this problem for many hundreds of years using the scientific method. And you probably do this a lot without even thinking about it. You basically have a question, you conduct an experiment or collect data if the data already exists, and then you reach a conclusion. Now, in today's world, you can do this so much better and so much faster about anything. Any product decision, pricing decision, channel decision. It doesn't have to be an internal debate in your offices, and it shouldn't be. And I'm sure people have written books about this. Steve Blank talks about this idea a lot. And you can basically run things like AdWord campaigns or social media campaigns to collect survey results and see what actually is important. Will people pay for your product? What features are important? When you have a question, don't just make it up. Go apply the scientific method out there in the real world and collect the data you need. Pitfall number 2, the idea is everything. Big problem with first-time entrepreneurs. They have an idea, they're like, oh my God, nothing can stop me, I have an idea. Well, I mean, I don't know, Airbnb is a wonderful idea, and so is Uber, and I'm sure a billion people, well, maybe not a billion, but many, many people had those ideas. But actually making them work is a pain in the butt. There's a bunch of things past the idea that you have to get right. This is a picture, anything you see in color in this presentation is from somebody else. This is from Bill Allais, wrote a book called Disciplined Entrepreneur. It's a good read if you're doing a startup. And basically the idea is about less than 5%. This is measured, like when VCs work with medical products or medical devices, they have measured that the idea itself alone is worth less than 5% of the total cost of bringing a drug or a device to market. I think the idea is worth 5% or less. A lot of people have good ideas. Making them happen is really hard. Now, and by the way, entrepreneurship is hard. And kudos if you want to try it. I should have said at the beginning. It's the most important thing I've learned after doing this over and over again is that it's shockingly hard. And it doesn't really get any easier. You just know more about the mistakes you're going to make. The next big pitfall is that it's all about product. People think, oh, look at Instagram, a great app for sharing pictures of cats. I can do that better. It's not all about product. By the way, Instagram, people use that a lot in New York City right now to compare themselves to things like Instagram. Instagram had exactly one user, Facebook. And that was maybe a really interesting, exciting aspect of timing. Real products have a bunch of steps they have to get through to figure out how to find their users, how they're going to sell to users, or how they're going to extract money in some ways. Bitly is an interesting example of providing services to people over here to extract revenue from people over here. This is another slide from Bill Allais' book. He's got 24 steps about how to create 24 steps to his disciplined entrepreneurship framework. And product isn't describing your product, just describing it, not building it, just describing your product in detail is step 22. So it's not all about product. Pitfall number 4, we get this a lot, it's kind of sad. When a founder tells me that they're the typical user, this is mostly apparent in consumer-facing things, but it's also apparent in B2B products as well. Now, not only is this demoralizing, it's a pain to work with these people. Like if I'm at a company and I hire like 20 engineers to build my thing and I'm the user, they have to come to me all the time to figure out which features are important or how to build the features. And the marketing guys, well, what are they going to do? They have to devise a campaign to reach me and I already know about the product. It's just not useful. So how do you get around the founding team or the founder thinking they're the typical user? You create user personas. Quick show of hands. How many have heard of user persona design? Okay, good. So I'll just kind of breeze through this. You can read books on this. It's a great idea, I think, attributed to Alan Cooper, great guy who solved it, who created this idea to solve his own problems. Here are some of the original user personas for 2 of the users we were after out of the 4 users we created. This company is one that I sold to Facebook. Now, a user persona is basically a very structured story about your user. You kind of start out by making it up, and then you go and find, you figure out if people actually meet that, or you can go use surveys and focus groups to figure out if there are people in your persona. The point of a persona is to define your user behaviors, their capabilities, their motivations, how they find out about new products, and you base it as much as you can on quantitative data. Now, getting them right is really tricky. You want to focus on things like goals, like what is my user trying to do, not because otherwise you fall into some traps there. You should go read a book on user persona design. If you get them right, they're helpful to everybody in your company, marketing, sales, biz dev, everybody. Here's a quick sample. Again, I'm stealing all these from Bill Lay's presentations. A bunch of specific details about this guy. None of them are useful in user persona. Outgoing. How do I target a user who's outgoing? Not very helpful. Here's an example of a user persona that's incredibly specific, salary, art, music that he likes, but again, not targetable. So there's a sweet spot where you're describing somebody, a middle-aged guy who's been in a company for 5 years, who makes the product decision for some kind of B2B solution. You kind of get the sense for the person you're shooting for. Pitfall number 5. I meet a lot of really amazing founders who can't really describe their product. They go on and on and on. I'll let them talk for 20 minutes, and then I'll say, so what are you actually doing? Why would I use your product? Why would anyone use your product? I'm sure you've met these people. They're not necessarily going to fail, but it's just so frustrating to figure out what are you trying to do. The solution to this problem, when you can't describe what you're trying to do effectively, is to think about through a lens of grabbers, not holders. Now, a grabber is a feature that brings a user to your product. Like, what are they going to do with your product in a phrase or less? A holder are the things that founding teams love to pontificate about, are all the features that you build into it to keep them happy once they're using it. But they're never going to come to your product for a great, they're never going to come to your solution for a great color scheme or a great design or a great set of interactions or any of that stuff. They're going to come to your product because it fills some basic emotional or physical need that they have. And that's the thing you talk about outside the company, the grabbers. Don't ever talk about the holders outside of the company. And everything you're doing, every feature in your product, you should classify as a grabber or a holder. It'll make your life a lot easier. Pitfall number 6, event-focused financial planning. And what I mean by this is a lot of founders will raise money. And by the way, raising money isn't really the hard part. Spending the money so you can make your investors more money, that's, I think, a lot trickier. There's a lot of capital out there. It's fairly easy to raise money at some terms for pretty much anything. But you raise the money, and then you rush headlong into your launch of your prototypical product. And then what? Then you launch it, you're out of money, you have to raise new money, and no one knows if it's worked yet because you haven't thought about what is really the goal here. The goal, investors do not care about your product launch. They care if your product actually works, if it brings actual users. So what you need to think about are the actual metrics, the actual goals that are defined by metrics that you're shooting for. Because quite honestly, if you could somehow make money for free for your investors without actually building a product, that would be better, right? So your product has some goal, the launch has some goal. The goal is, you can define it by metrics. You can define that long before you even build the product. And then you can figure out when you'll need more money to make the product better or how much money you'll need to get the product launched through a consistent set of goals that you can actually measure. Some companies, they need to get to, say, 10,000 users. So I have to launch the product and then run the thing and pay for everything until I get to 10,000 users. Or maybe 5 if it's a big B2B play. If I can just build the product and sell it to 5 alpha users, I'm done. So you think about your goals when you start, you think about the metrics you need to collect to define those goals, and then you plan your finances out accordingly. And you think about the best way to do this, because that's a lot of talk, but the best way to actually do this is to just write the pitch deck for the N+1 raise now. And Reid Hoffman actually wrote a great piece on this a few weeks ago. I should have put the link in here. Go look it up. I mean, he doesn't write that much. And that was one of his points, and it's a great point. And the nice thing about this thing is that it keeps you focused because you know exactly what you're shooting for. You'll see that a lot of things you might think are important aren't that important when you actually write that N+1 raise deck. And staying focused is really, really hard when you're in a startup. I mean, you all know that. There's a bunch of things coming your way, you know, personnel issues, who do you hire, where do you move, how are you going to take care of the free cafeteria, more importantly, what am I going to build and how am I going to sell it? It's really easy to get distracted, and everything's always going to be a lot harder than you think. So how do you solve this problem? I mean, everybody always tells me they're super focused, and then we talk about what they're doing, and I find out they're doing all this extra stuff that they can't explain why it's at all relevant to what they're trying to do. It's easy to fall into that trap. So how do you solve for that? Create a really short list of measurable goals and put them in rank order. And then draw a line between the must-haves and the like-to-haves, and then take that line between what you have to do and what you would like to do and crank it up a little bit more, leaving you with this slightly irrational but shorter list of things you have to do. And try to come to work for a few weeks and only focus on that. And I don't know, it sounds simple. You'd be surprised to see how hard that is, but that seems to help people a lot. And that's basically it. That's like 20 years of collected wisdom in a few short pitfalls to avoid.